Hello everyone, and welcome to the History of the Ancient World channel. Today, we're journeying back in time to the Fertile Crescent to uncover the story of one of the most formidable and feared empires in history, Assyria. For centuries, the very name of Assyria struck terror into the hearts of kings and commoners alike. But how did this kingdom, nestled in what is now northern Iraq, rise to dominate the ancient Near East? The answer lies in its revolutionary and relentless war machine. The story of Assyrian military might begin with its geography. Unlike the protected Nile Valley of Egypt, Assyria was situated on an open plain, vulnerable to attack from all sides. This constant threat forged a society that was perpetually ready for war. Survival depended on military strength. And the Assyrians didn't just adapt, they excelled. They transformed warfare from a seasonal activity into a professional, year-round state enterprise. This was their first major innovation, a standing army. While other kingdoms relied on farmers who would temporarily leave their fields to fight, Assyria developed a core of professional soldiers, highly trained and loyal only to the king. This permanent force could be deployed at a moment's notice, giving the Assyrians a massive advantage in speed and readiness. But a professional army needs advanced equipment. The Assyrians were masters of ironworking. While their neighbors were still using softer bronze, Assyrian soldiers were armed with iron swords, iron-tipped spears, and iron helmets. This gave them a decisive edge in close-quarters combat. Their army was a masterpiece of organization, divided into distinct units. You had the infantry, the backbone of the army, who fought in disciplined formations. Then there were the archers, raining down death from a distance with powerful composite bows. And let's not forget the cavalry and chariots. The Assyrians were pioneers in using mounted horsemen, not just for scouting, but as effective shock troops, capable of chasing down fleeing enemies. Their chariots evolved from heavy, slow platforms into lighter, faster vehicles, creating chaos and breaking enemy lines. This combined arms approach, where different units worked together in a coordinated strategy, was revolutionary for its time. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the Assyrian military was its expertise in siege warfare. Walled cities were the greatest defense in the ancient world, often able to withstand attacks for months or even years. The Assyrians, however, saw walls not as barriers, but as challenges to be overcome with engineering and brute force. They developed an entire arsenal of siege equipment. They built massive, movable wooden towers, sometimes taller than the city walls themselves, allowing archers to fire down upon the defenders. They perfected the battering ram, protecting it under a sturdy armored vehicle called a tortoise that shielded the operators from enemy arrows and boiling oil. If brute force wasn't enough, they employed psychological tactics. Before a siege even began, Assyrian envoys would demand surrender, describing in gruesome detail what would happen if the city resisted. They would build massive earthen ramps right up to the city walls, a slow, methodical process that demoralized the defenders day by day. They were also expert sappers, digging tunnels underneath walls to collapse them from below. No city felt safe. The Assyrians had a solution for every defensive strategy, and their reputation for success often meant cities would surrender without a fight. One of the most famous Assyrian kings, Tiglath-Pileser III, who reigned in the 8th century BC, is often credited with transforming Assyria into a true empire. He reformed the military and the state, creating a more centralized and efficient system. He was the one who truly perfected the policy of mass deportation. After conquering a region, the Assyrians would forcibly relocate large portions of the population to other parts of the empire. This wasn't just random cruelty, it was a calculated strategy. It broke local loyalties, prevented organized rebellions, and provided a labor force for the empire's grand building projects. It was a brutal but effective tool of control. His successors like Sargon II, Sennacherib, and Ashurbanipal continued these expansionist policies. Sennacherib's campaign against the Kingdom of Judah is famously documented, not just in Assyrian records, but also in the Bible. His siege of Lachish is depicted in stunning detail on reliefs that once adorned his palace in Nineveh. These carvings show the entire process of the siege, the ramps, the siege towers, the archers, and the grim fate of the captured inhabitants. They were propaganda designed to showcase Assyrian power and deter any future rebellions. Ashurbanipal, the last great king of Assyria, ruled over an empire at its absolute peak, stretching from Egypt to parts of modern-day Iran. He was a warrior king, but also a scholar who assembled a vast library of cuneiform tablets in his capital, Nineveh. Ironically, the records of their own brutality and conquests, meant to glorify their power, are what provide us with such a detailed picture of their world today. These records tell a story of relentless campaigns, year after year, to expand the empire's borders and crush any dissent. However, an empire built on fear and maintained by constant warfare is inherently unstable. The resources required to sustain this massive military machine were immense. The constant campaigns drained the treasury and the manpower of the Assyrian heartland. The brutal policies that had kept the empire together also sowed the seeds of its destruction. The hatred for Assyrian rule simmered among its conquered peoples, who were just waiting for a moment of weakness. That moment came in the late 7th century BC. A series of civil wars over succession weakened the central authority of the Assyrian king. Seeing their chance, a coalition of their enemies, led by the Babylonians from the south and the Medes from the east, rose up in a great revolt. This time the Assyrians were on the defensive. The hunters became the hunted. The legendary siege tactics of the Assyrians were now used against them. In 612 BC, the grand capital of Nineveh, the exceeding great city, was besieged, captured, and utterly destroyed. The fall was as swift and brutal as Assyria's own conquest. The Assyrian Empire, which had dominated the world stage for 3 centuries, vanished from history almost overnight. Its cities were reduced to ruins, and its people were scattered. The very memory of their power faded, becoming little more than a legend told in the Bible, until archaeologists began uncovering their buried palaces in the 19th century. So what is the legacy of the Assyrian wars? They represent a pivotal moment in the history of warfare. They showed the world the power of a professional, well-equipped, and organized standing army. They perfected siegecraft and psychological warfare, setting a blueprint that would be studied and copied by later empires, including the Persians and the Romans. But their story is also a cautionary tale. It shows how an empire built solely on military might and terror, without winning the loyalty of its subjects, rests on a fragile foundation. The fear they inspired eventually fueled the hatred that brought them down. The Assyrians were more than just brutal conquerors. They were innovators, engineers, and administrators who fundamentally changed the political and military landscape of the ancient world. Their rise and fall is a dramatic epic of power, innovation, and the ultimate price of empire. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the history of the Assyrian war machine. If you found this journey into the ancient world fascinating, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Let us know in the comments which ancient civilization you'd like to see us cover next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.